Today we have Mads from Copenhagen, Denmark. We'll talk about his story also about coding mindset to apply to interviews. But first of all, I'd like to thank him so much because we have here mine 1,000th subscriber. So thank you so much. How are you, Mads?
Oh, you're welcome, man. I've been watching, most of your videos like over the last month here, since you started your crazy challenge of 100 videos in 100 days, which I thought was like super exciting. And I know a little bit about all these people you're talking to, but it's really nice to kind of, get to know them more like in detail and learn a lot more from them than it's possible on Twitter, right? So it's nice to have like a different format where you really get to ask like some in-depth questions and learn.
Yeah. Also to relax a little bit the fingers because we chat so much. We chat kind of a lot. Let's say that. So this is kind of a pause. At least when I record this kind of videos, I stop chatting. So this is good.
Yeah, true. Very important.
This is just a break. Yeah.
So, but then I realized, so like, even though I watched all the videos, I wasn't subscribed. So I was like, well, I got to fix that. And then, of course, you were at 999.
This is very bad. And this has to be fixed as soon as possible. So if you are watching now, please subscribe to this channel.
Press the button.
Hit the like button and all the stuff that you already know. We know this YouTuber, it's old now. You know all this stuff, but And one thing before we can start, for example, when I started this YouTube channel, this changed also my point of view on liking and subscribing to channel, because now I really know the effort that there is behind that. So now I know that. Yeah.
And it really makes a big difference, right? Like when people actually subscribe, like that's how YouTube knows that people like your stuff. And
yeah, it makes a difference. Yeah. Thank you. So Mads, what about you? Tell us your story. How did you become a developer? And you can take this as long as you want, from your childhood or the last 6 months.
But basically, when I was a kid growing up, I was always like into computers, right? Like I was playing video games in my room. I got kind of just good at like using the computer, because that's what you do when you play games, right? You kind of learn how to use the mouse and keyboard effectively and all those things. So I pretty early on, I kind of figured out that, okay, I wanted to work somewhere in IT. Like I didn't know if I was going to be a developer or a programmer or like anything like that, but I knew that, okay, I wanted to work with computers in some way. But then I wasn't really sure if programming was actually for me, because I couldn't really imagine, like myself sitting there, like writing code all day, and kind of that being like my life or my job. But then when I got into high school, I kind of like gave it a shot anyways. I was probably like 15, 16, and that was when Code Academy. I don't know if you know that, but it's like a site for learning programming where they have different courses and tracks and all those things. Yeah, so I started with that one, and I thought it was pretty fun. Like, you could it was really easy to get started. There was nice exercises. So that kind of made me realize that maybe this whole programming thing isn't so bad. Maybe like if I want to work in IT, maybe it makes sense to become a developer. But I still wasn't really 100% sure. So when I finished high school, I was going to apply for university, but I didn't want to commit to like programming. I didn't want to go for like a super intense like programming study. So instead, I started on what's called the Copenhagen Business School, where I found a program which was a mix of business and like economics and also IT, because I figured that would be a nice way for me to like, kind of mix my interest, and it would have some IT focus, but it wouldn't be 100% like coding. There would be other things as well. But then what happened was when I started there, I kind of realized that I really, really liked the IT part. I really liked the programming. I really liked the development side of things, and I didn't really enjoy the economic part of it. So that was kind of like a nice wake-up call for me, where I was like, okay, maybe this programming thing is actually for me, and I could see myself doing this like for real. So I quit that program, and then I started studying software development instead at there's an IT university in Copenhagen. So I started on my bachelor's there, where I was studying software development, which is like basically it's like computer science, right? You have all the classic data structures and algorithms and databases and all these.
I have a computer science degree. So
nice. Nice. Yeah. So basically all these like traditional courses and operating systems and C and all these different languages. So I started that a few years ago, and then it was mostly like back-end focused, because computer science is kind of theoretical in a way, and the languages you use, the languages are like you use like Java and C#. At least that's what we did, which are like more back-end languages. But then about halfway through, I kind of realized that, okay, I don't even know how I got started. I think I just wanted to like learn how do I make a website, right? So I type in Google like how to make a website, and then there's this HTML thing that pops up, and then I was, all right, that looks pretty cool. It looks pretty straightforward. I could do that. So then I kind of just like on my own time while I was studying, the more backend focused program, I started to get into front-end development basically with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and all those things.
Good.
Yeah, and then I realized that was what I wanted to do. Like the backend stuff didn't really interest me that much, but I was really into front-end development. So I applied for my first job while I was still studying. I got a student job as a front-end developer, which was pretty interesting because I didn't really have a lot of experience. I'd done like just some HTML, CSS websites for like maybe half a year or something, and then I found an opening for a front-end position. I was like, well, let's give it a shot. Let's try. I mean, what could go wrong, right? So I applied for it, and I got the job somehow. I'm still not exactly sure why, but I got the job, and that just made me realize even more that front-end development was what I wanted to work with.
Probably because you were good, probably.
Yeah, probably, but I don't think I was that good because I didn't have much experience. But I had focused on making my portfolio website, and then I put some of the school projects I had done. I put on my portfolio just to like kind of have something to fill it out. And that was really nice. I remember I talked to the company later. They were like, yeah, we saw your portfolio. We saw that you could actually, do things, and you showed us a bit more like personality than people who just, submit an application or a resume and then nothing else. So just having a portfolio was really, that's where I learned like how important that was, especially for your first job when that's all you have, right? Like you don't have any other experience you can take on. So you kind of need the portfolio. So then I worked that job while I was studying, and then about a year later, I switched to another job, which was more like full-on front-end development. I worked at an agency, so this was where I actually got put in charge of like real big projects. Like here's a client, they need this website or this web shop or something, and then I would like go and implement that like by myself basically. And that was a really nice learning experience for me because before I had only been working as a student, so my tasks were kind of limited in a way. But now I was like, going full time on this like agency job where there was like a lot of pressure, a lot of like tight deadlines that needed to be met, and a lot of sometimes angry clients that needed their website done. So that was a really like great environment for me to learn in. And then eventually I switched job again, like 3 months ago. I switched to another agency just to like kind of try something different and move to a slightly bigger one. So that's where I'm working now, and I'm still doing like front-end development, and I'm taking charge of these kind of big projects for pretty big clients, and like implementing basically the entire front end with usually Vue, sometimes React, but always like with these modern JavaScript frameworks, which is what I realized that I really like doing.
Yeah. We had a pretty similar story. So I like to talk, but for example, also in my case, I studied in university almost all backend languages, and I studied, for example, JavaScript by myself, web development by myself. And when I found my job, it was more about the web development. So yeah, it has been a little bit strange that after all these years of the computer science, it was more helpful maybe a Udemy course than actually the university itself. Sorry for that. But I think it depends on what you want to do. By many factors, it depends, but we have some pretty similar stories.
Yeah, I think also it's hard for universities to make a front-end development, degree because it changes so often, right? Like you could teach React and then in 3 years, we're not using React anymore, we're using something else. So it's very hard to like make a program that teaches web development.
Yeah, and maybe sometimes for university professors, maybe they have a family, a lot of children. They're not that super young, so maybe it's hard for them to keep it up. It's hard
That's
for everyone, but by actually having a university course, this takes time to you. So you can't be updated on the day when the new React version is out. Of course, I had a very good professor or Android development. He was the only one who was updating himself every year, but it was the only one really crazy, a really very good professor. But that was the exception.
Yeah, most people don't do that.
Most people don't do that. Yeah. So yeah, so Matt, you had already changed the and tried the kind of a lot of jobs, 2 3 jobs. I don't know if you have said that on Twitter. I can't remember now. 2 months today ago, but yeah. So for example, what has been your experience on your first job and the second one? Because I think the first the first time it's always the hardest. So what has been the
Yeah.
difference?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first job, obviously, it was only a student position, so I was working 2 days per week, which was it's a little bit different from working full time. But I think it's a really great way to kind of get your foot in the door. Like, because if you get a student position, well, the company they don't expect that much from you because you're just a student like developer, right? So you can kind of get in there and you can really show how great you are and you can do some great work and people don't expect it because they're like you're just a student developer.
Yeah,
So it's a really great way to kind of
yeah,
shine.
yeah, you have all bonus. Yeah, if you do something
Yeah,
good, it's good. If you not good, do the yeah. So maybe
it,
it's even better. Yeah, if you
yeah,
are if you are relaxed about that,
exactly.
maybe you
And it's
can
just a
give
great
the
way to
best.
learn because
Yeah.
then you kind of you get in a team with like some senior developers and stuff like that. So my first job that was in a like a really big company, like a bank insurance company. So it was kind of where I joined the web team and I kind of started helping out on their website and like fixing bugs, making small changes and stuff. And that was a really great like introduction because big companies like this there's usually a bit less stress, like it's kind of more relaxed because they like they're big companies, they have a lot of money, so you can really just like take your time to learn from your senior developers, which there was at
Yeah,
least like
I
four or
got your
five senior
point.
developers. Yeah, so then I could like learn from them, which was great for me because it was my first job, right? So I didn't know what I was getting into really. But then after about a year I kind of decided that I wanted a bit more like responsibility. I thought things were moving a bit too slowly, not just for me, but just like in the company in general, because there's like a whole team just working on one website basically. That got a little bit like slow for me. I kind of wanted to, try something like a more fast-paced environment where I could learn quicker. Um, and also it had kind of been my dream for a while to just work in an agency where every project is like a completely new thing. So if people don't know, like an agency, you have a client that comes to you and says, hey, we need this website or we need this web shop or web app or whatever, and then you build it from scratch basically, and then there's a deadline, and then the project is done, and then you move on to something else. And I really wanted to kind of try that because I'm a kind of maybe impatient person sometimes. So if I work on the same thing over and over and over again, I get bored, like I get tired of it. Um, so agency was like a great way for me to work on a project for 1 2 3 months maybe, and then kind of move on to the next thing, which I really really enjoyed. And also it was a very small place. We were only like 5 employees, so there was me and one other developer, which meant that I got a lot of responsibility because suddenly when I had to make a project, well, it was just me, right? Like I had a lot of like freedom. I could choose like which technologies we were going to use. I could develop it the way I wanted to, which was like super fun and really like pushed me to, okay, well, I got to make the right decisions because I'm making like a real website for a real client here who's paying good money for this. I need to do it well. So that made me like learn super fast, and I got to play with different like technologies because then we got a new project which had to be done with like a lot of animations and like a 3D like visual kind of site. So then I had to learn that on the job basically, which is like the dream because then you're just you're getting paid to learn new things for yourself. And that's what I really loved about the agency work. Um, but then at some point, because we were so few developers, we were like just me and one other guy. I kind of started to miss having more senior people to learn from, because I was still early in my career, right? Like this was my second job. I'd been coding for maybe 1.5 year, 2 years max. So I still wanted to learn from other people. Like I still wanted to see how seniors were doing things and be able to ask questions like, hey, I'm thinking of doing this way, like I want to solve the problem in one way, but is this correct or is there a better way? I didn't really have anyone who could tell me that in that job, or because I was working alone on the projects, I just couldn't talk to people. I couldn't get any real feedback on like my code quality. So I decided, well, I don't want to like build a lot of bad habits now of just quick hacks and small fixes and then like kind of getting stuck with that. I wanted to switch to another place where I could have more people to learn from. And I still wanted to work in this like agency environment where you have, deadlines and you work on specific projects and then you switch every once in a while. But I wanted to do it in a slightly like larger place with more front-end developers that I could talk to and just learn from.
I really like your mindset. I think it's it's one of the best mindsets I listen to. Yeah, and sometimes it's hard, and I think that this is one thing that really a developer needs. Yeah, this mindset embrace the changing, because this is what our is the development. So it's continuously changing. So if you are ready to change from, so for example, don't stick too much on a framework, on a language, but be ready to change. So I really like that. So yeah, I think you are really the right person to talk about exactly this topic. Man. Yeah, so yeah, I'm really happy about that.
Thanks. So it's also just I think development, you just kind of have to have this mindset at some point. You know, it's I call it lifelong learning, right? Where you need to be continuously improving, and you need to want to improve. Because if you're gonna get stuck in some old technology, I don't know, it's just gonna be hard for you to keep up. And then I'm not sure if like development is like the best choice for you. You kind of need to have this like, I don't want to say passion, because you know it's also fine to just have a job, work your 9 to 5, and then go home. But I think there's something to the fact that if you have this mindset of like always wanting to improve and learn new things, it's going to be easier for you to be a developer and have a nice job.
Yeah, and of course, you also can be a developer in any case. But I agree with what you say, that sometimes maybe it could be easier if you are ready to change something. It will be easier for you. So yeah, I agree. I agree with you about that. So can we say do you have some tips, something that we can say to maybe some developers that maybe they're watching this video, about what's the right mindset, for example, when they evolve? Maybe let's pretend that they start from zero. So they start from zero. They are self-taught developers. Most of them are, not all, but most of them. And as you said, they start googling things as you did, and this is already a good sign that you start googling things if you have a problem. So this is just already a good sign. Definitely. Instead of asking around. So yeah. So what do you think could be something that we can say to them? Maybe after how much time they should start looking for a job, for example?
So I think it depends a lot on how much time you have to you want to put in every day, right? So if you have time to put in 5 hours of work every day, well, then you can probably learn to code and get a nice job in maybe, let's say, 3, 4, 5 months or something. But if you can only put in a few hours per week for, you have a full-time job, you have a family, all these things, well, then of course it's going to take longer. And that's kind of normal. You just have to kind of decide which path is the right one for you there. And there's no right or wrong answer. You just have to figure out what you can do in your situation. But I think what's more important is that you kind of focus your learning. So what I did when I started out was I would learn a lot of different programming languages, which is a really bad idea, because then you don't really get good at any one of them. So I would kind of look, oh, this JavaScript thing looks cool. So I'll learn what's a for loop, what's an if-else statement, how do you do that in JavaScript? And then as soon as it started getting hard and I actually had to build something, I was like, this is a bit too hard. I'm going to try Python. Python looks much better, right? Then you learn the syntax over there, you learn loops and all these things again, but you feel productive because you're learning new things, but you're not actually getting better as a developer, because you're learning the same things.
Yeah. I had this question months ago. Can I learn different languages at the same time? Usually the answer is depends. But I'd say that it's like trying to learn, I don't know, German and French at the same time, and you just know your own native language. So it depends. If you already know 6, 7 languages, maybe you want to try 2 new languages, maybe you could. But in my opinion, I never suggest to do this. Exactly. At the end of the day, everyone is free. You can do that, but maybe if you are lost, maybe you could listen to maybe someone that has tried this and it didn't work. So
and also when you're just starting out, you're probably learning to code because you want to get a job at some point, right? And the faster you can get a job, the faster you can commit to learning and getting better as a developer on full time, because now you're going to get paid to learn these things. And that's why I think it's really important to just focus go really deep on one particular language. Of course, if you're front-end development, you're also going to have to do HTML and CSS on top of JavaScript. But I still think it's really important that you make this focus and you actually take your skills and you use them to build projects, because ultimately that's what's going to land you the job. It's going to be your portfolio that's going to show, okay, look, I've done these 3 different projects. They look great. They work great. That's what's going to get your foot in the door when you don't have any other experience. It doesn't matter that you've you know the basics of 5 different languages. Like, nobody cares about that. Like, that's not going to get you hired. What's going to get hired is that you can actually show, hey, I can build things, I can contribute to a company with these skills. And you can only do that if you really like go deep and learn a few things really well and build stuff with it.
I think it will be hard if you know just how to say hello in German and French to get a job as an interpreter.
Yeah, right. That doesn't work. That doesn't work like that. Because companies, they have one tech stack or one language, so they want you to be an expert at that. They don't want you to know these 8 other ones that they don't care about. So you kind of have to, when you're starting out and you're learning and you're aiming for that first job, you have to think, when you're sitting there or when you're applying, what is the company going to think? Like, what are they looking for? And of course, that's really hard to know because, I mean, you don't really have the experience, but you can kind of think, well, like, what does a company do? Well, they make money, right? They want to hire people that helps them make money. Okay. So how are you going to do that? Well, you need to be good at whatever they're doing, whatever they need you to work on. And then also, once you kind of have your portfolio and a few projects, I think even if you don't feel qualified, like even if you don't feel like you're ready to take on a job, I think you should start applying. Because when you spend some time, well, first thing, you're going to get better at sending applications and like kind of making your resume look good and all those things. You're going to get better at that. And also then let's say you get a couple interviews, maybe you're going to learn what the companies are actually searching for. You're going to learn what questions they ask you. You're going to pretty quickly figure out if you can actually do the job or if you still have more learning to do. But you can't do that unless you actually start applying. And it is hard because these job specs, you read them, they require like 8 years of experience and this and that and this and that. And there's a lot of different things, but you, in my opinion, you shouldn't worry too much about that. If you read, like, if you check off some of the bullet points and it says it's like a junior position or something, I think you should just apply, and then you should let it be up to the company if they think you're ready for it. Because if you never apply, well, then you're just rejecting yourself before you even get a chance. And then you're not getting better at interviewing, you're not getting better at sending applications, you're not learning what companies are actually wanting. So then how do you know which way to go, right? You just get stuck. So I think that's a really key lesson when you're learning. Like, you focus, of course, in the beginning on getting good enough that you can build a few projects, make a portfolio, and then you just start applying. And then you kind of refine your learning from there. Like, what are people searching for? Maybe in your area, there's only React jobs. Well, then, maybe that's the direction you should go. Or maybe it's some other, technology that's really popular. Well, then you start going in that direction. But you won't learn that until you actually, take a look around and start applying.
Yeah, and I think it's totally different because maybe you can know a lot of things, but the interview is something different. So if your final idea, for example, is to apply, as you said, it maybe it's not that, but in this case, if your idea is to study to get some interviews and like that, yeah, the earlier you start, the earlier maybe you can also try with some companies. Then I think that if they make an offer, you can also always reject that. So there's no problem. In that case, you can listen to their offer. Maybe they could offer twice what you are thinking. So maybe in that case, yeah, I like your practical approach, which is the best one, because otherwise, yeah, maybe you can learn for years, and then you understand it. Okay, now I also need to get better at interviews. So so you need other months to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And the real secret is that the learning happens on the job. So imposter syndrome, of course, is we all know it. It's this feeling of, even if you get hired, like, am I really good enough? Like, did they make a mistake hiring me? Are they going to figure out that I'm not good enough, that I can't do this job and then fire me? I think most people, I think, have like felt this at some point, right? When you sit there, you're like stuck on a bug and you're like, well, am I even like capable of doing this job? But the real answer is that if the company hires you, well, then they decided that you were good enough. And then it just helps to know that, well, other developers struggle with this as well. And of course, you're a junior, right? Like, you just started out, this is your first job or maybe second job. You're not expected to know everything. Like if you were, well, then you would be a senior developer, and your salary would be twice or 3 times yours. So you just kind of have to realize that it's okay that you're new and that you're still learning. The company knows that, and they chose to hire you. But that's also why I think that it's a really good idea to apply to these larger companies, and especially like non-tech companies. Because if you think about it, every, let's say, normal or traditional company in the world now, they need some form of IT solution or developers or programming, because they all have a website, they all have services or something they sell online. That's true for every single company, basically, at this point. And when you work in those like large companies, well, then you'll have like senior developers to learn from, like I told in my story, right, my first job. And also it's a little less stressful, because usually there aren't that tight deadlines, so you don't feel this dread that, oh no, I have a deadline coming up this week, and if I don't finish it, well, then I'm going to get fired. You have kind of more time to just focus on learning and improving yourself while still contributing to the company and learning on the job. So I think that's definitely the type of company you should apply for when you're going for that first job and you don't have a lot of experience yet, and you don't really know like how good you are yet or what you can do. It's a much safer environment to work in and kind of grow in the beginning.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So yeah, basically by staying in a job, also changing job is like a process, like the coding itself. It's a part of the process. It's not something different that you eventually you will do in the future one day. That I don't know what you're waiting for. Yeah, I think that you need some months, I say, to have a good understanding of the basics. Of course, I've had some friends who got a job randomly, so they just are just maybe the company really need that kind of developer. Maybe the interviewer was not the best one. They just made something and they got a job. I'm happy for them. Maybe they started to learn. I think that at least the basics also for you. But I think in my opinion, it's also for you to understand, because maybe you can get a Python job, but if you don't like Python, you are losing time anyway. Also, if you are getting a paycheck, so that's not bad. But you should change anyway. So at least for you, you could check the basics, and
yeah, you kind of need to figure out what you want to work with, right? And sometimes you only learn that after your first job or your second job, or it can always change later, right? When you try out different things. But I think when you're just starting out, you kind of you should have at least some idea of which field you want to work with. Like, you're into like front-end development and like the visual parts, maybe a little bit of design, like you like making things look good, or you're more into servers and working in a terminal and databases and stuff like that. And then you kind of focus your learning on that, and you apply for jobs in that area. And then maybe once you get deeper into it, you might change. Like that's fine. Like, you're not set in stone, but it's just to land that first job, it's kind of important that you have that focus and you kind of think about which path you want to take.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. This has been really, I like also what you say, that maybe someone could think that maybe it's something too easy, too simple, but I like the simple things. So thank you for saying this, because sometimes we need to hear maybe something very simple just to get started. Maybe the good words just to get started. Yeah. We're not here saying this kind of super secrets. We are just saying our experience, your experience. I like this. So I think this could be really, really helpful for someone.
Yeah, I hope so. And that's also the whole idea of why I'm even like on Twitter, and I think also why you're making these videos, is because we want to share our experiences, because we know what worked for us and what didn't work for us, and we kind of want to help other people, figure that out as efficiently and as quickly as they can.
Yeah. And also keep repeating. For example, when I started to get seriously into the programming, I've tried every 3 weeks, I've changed the JavaScript framework from JavaScript front-end frameworks. That was bad, for example. Don't do that. This is my suggestion. So
it's all very individual, right? But I think also what's kind of missing sometimes is when people talk about learning to code, well, then we tell them, okay, you should learn HTML and CSS and JavaScript and React, but we're kind of missing a lot of these other, let's call them soft skills, that really help you like actually work efficiently in a company. Because you might get hired because you have like some really nice React projects on your portfolio, but once you're actually working there, well, then it's some other factors that play a huge part as well. Like, you need to be great at communicating with like your managers and your team members. You need to be good at working in a team. It doesn't matter if you're like the best React developer in the world. If you're kind of an like, then no one's going to want to work with you. So I think that's very easy to forget. Yeah. And when you apply for jobs and when you're landing that first job, it's just there are other things than just code that go into if a company is going to hire you. Especially this like whole teamwork thing, and I think also maybe it gets easier with time, but kind of understanding, how do I create value for the company? Like, what do I need to do personally to help the company, make money and grow, and show my team members that I'm a part of this and understand the business. I think that's a really like kind of overlooked part of like the whole learning to code thing, and that's also why I like this idea of having a coding mindset, because it's not just about code. It's also about contributing to a company and functioning as part of a team, and that's really important and sometimes overlooked.
Yeah, let me say that I know this pretty well, because I was a volleyball trainer, so I created teams of players. So you can be the best player in the world, but if you're not that team player, yeah, maybe a team is not a place for you. So it's not about just only the primary skills that, of course, they are important, but for me, something so clear, because coming from that word, it's something very clear. Maybe for someone else would not be that maybe they think I just need to be the best, as you say, the best React developer. But yeah, it's not only about that. Of course, that is important. Of course, also in the music, if you play the guitar very well, but you never contact other people, you are always late. So in that case, it's not only about that. Yeah,
exactly. And it's also when you work in a job, it's very easy to kind of sometimes you attach yourself to your code. So you're like, if you write some code and then you make a pull request, someone reviews it, and they point out some flaws in your code or something, you kind of feel bad. You're like, oh no, I made this mistake. I'm bad at developing, and maybe I shouldn't even be here. But that's just another point that's not necessarily true. Like, you're a junior, right? This is your first, second, third job, maybe. And even if it's your 10th job, you're still going to be making mistakes. And what's really important is not that you don't make mistakes. It's just that you kind of try to learn from them. It's that you accept this feedback. So if someone, calls out that, hey, you could have done this in a different way, you should be happy for that. Like, you should see that as, okay, well, this is an opportunity for me to grow and learn something I didn't know before. And that goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, right? It's a lot easier to be a developer when you have this mindset that, okay, I'm going to be learning from now until the end of time. Like, that's if you have this mindset, it makes it a lot easier to accept these things, and then you get like actively happy when people point out mistakes in your code, or you start even like asking for feedback earlier, like, hey, I'm thinking of making this feature in this way, but it doesn't feel great. Is there an alternative, or can I do something different? That's super important, and that's also why I recommend working with the larger teams of other developers, because they can teach you these things, and they'll be happy to, because they want to see you grow and get better. You just need to accept it in the right way.
Yeah, and I also think that it depends also on the person who is actually reviewing your pull request, because we are all different. One person say, "Oh, I don't like this," and a person could say, "This is perfect for me." So sure. Of course, it depends on the person which, in the end, is accepting or reacting the pull request. But we should listen to feedbacks also, and I also think that the good. The good criticism feedbacks also, they could maybe be helpful for you to change to question yourself, okay, but am I doing this correctly or not? Exactly. So
it's super helpful, because how are you going to get better otherwise, right? Then you might do something and you think it's okay, but maybe it's not. Maybe it has bugs. Maybe it has, it could have been smarter, and you want to do the best work you can do, but you need someone to help you get there.
Yeah, or for example, the person could say, okay, this is good, but if you accept this pull request with this change, which could lead to these other changes, so it also depends.
Yeah, and it ties in with this, the whole mindset thing, which is also where I think one of the most important things for new developers, or when you're just learning to code, is to kind of build some good habits, like around coding. So, I don't know if you know the book Atomic Habits, but it's like, it's a guy called James Clear who wrote it, who's like really big on like habits and how they work. And it's a really, really great book. and it basically talks about that habits are kind of the way you define your life in a way. Because if you think about, okay, I want to be a developer 1 year from now, that's a great goal, but it's not actionable. It's like, how do you do that? You don't know that, right? Like, you don't know which steps to take to be a developer in 1 year. But what habits kind of the way habits want you to think is, okay, let's say instead of that, I'm gonna code 1 hour per day. I'm gonna do 1 hour of JavaScript or Python, whatever, every single day, or I'm gonna do 3 hours every weekend, or whatever works for you. But if you have this habit and you kind of just keep it consistently, well, then sooner or later you're going to reach that goal of becoming a developer, just because the habits you've built are working in your favor. They're gonna, if you have good habits, well, then over time those habits are going to lead to results. You just need to give it that time. And that's, I think, a really super important thing for developers to just develop these great habits. Try to like actively think about like, where is it that I'm trying to go. That's fine to have a goal, but you need to have some form of system to get there. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. Like, I could also say, okay, I want to write 52 blog posts in a year. Let's say, like, that's a great goal, but it's not going to happen by itself, right? So the way I would rephrase it is, I would say, okay, I'm going to write one blog post every Sunday for a year. Well, then you're going to have the same result. You're going to end with 52 blog posts in a year, but you're actually going to have a way of doing it. It's going to feel much more achievable because, well, then it's just one blog post after the other, and then you'll get there. It's kind of a little bit similar to your video thing, where you're like, I'm going to do one video per day, right? That's how you get to 100. You don't just decide, I'm going to do 100 videos. No, I'm going to do one every day.
I made this announcement after my making a lot. So after the first time, I was just like, okay, I'll make some video calls with some of my friends, and that's it. I don't know when, sometimes, once in a month. So that's it. Then I started getting very good feedbacks. Started interviewing with people. I started maybe improving my English a little bit. For example, the people started to call them these interviews, but this was not something in my mind. For example, after that, okay, so this makes me an host. Now, for example, I also watched some videos on some famous journalists how they interview people, because I know nothing about that.
Of course.
So I just watched them. It's a bit awkward to say this, because I really know nothing about that. And after a while, after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, no, 2 weeks, I decided to do this, but I had already done kind of a lot of interviews already. So I decided to take this as a challenge, because I like challenges, as I said in my video. So in my case, that's it. But this was not the initial goal of, for example, of my YouTube channel, or after the first or the second video calls. Not at all. Yeah.
No, you kind of figured it out as you go along, right? And then you're like, okay, I actually like doing these, and it's fun, and it's a great challenge. So I'm gonna like commit to this, creating this habit of interviewing one every day. And that's really gonna help you like reach the goal.
I think this is different. But I think that if I had made this announcement in the beginning, I would have failed hard. So instead, I've made this announcement after a while. So this it is challenging, but I have people like you helping me, actually, because you are actually helping me in this challenge. Thank you so much.
Of course, man. We're helping each other. That's what I really like about this series, because it's nice for you to like you get the video on your YouTube channel, you get to grow your YouTube channel, but it's also just nice for me to kind of get some experience, like being on camera and talking with you, and so it's just like a win-win,
Yeah, this makes me really happy. I don't know your experience in public speaking. We had here really great public speakers, but I want to give space to everyone. I'm not that good, so So I don't know, what's your experience with that? Do you want to make something to create some YouTube channels?
I'm not really, I haven't thought too much about a YouTube channel, but I want to probably make a video course at some point. I just need to figure out what I want to teach, because I wrote my book on the coding mindset about 4 months ago, I think 3 months ago I released it. And that was really nice to like try that out. Like I've always wanted to write a book, and then I had some time with there was the lockdown and everything with the pandemic, so I had time. But I think for the next thing, I really want to do like a video course, because I really enjoy. I don't know if you know people like Wes Boss, and there's these people who make like great JavaScript courses that I think are just super helpful for people. And I kind of want to get more into that. And then this is like a great way to get some experience, just like being on camera and being on video and talking, because it's a very different format, it's a very different medium than writing, of
Yeah,
course.
for me, for me also it's totally new. So maybe
Yeah,
I could look a little bit more natural than 2 months ago, but it's still so
yeah.
new to me. Yeah, I'm
But
happy if I made some progress. I hope, but yeah, something very new to me. And
but
also, yeah, I wanted already to ask you about your book. So we'll talk about that. How has been your experience in, for example, writing this book? What is this about? Because we already talked about this coding mindset, but
yeah,
what's the book about?
yeah, that's a great question. So I split it. Well, it's called Mastering the Coding Mindset, and it's kind of a lot of the things that we talked about here, but of course in more detail, and there's a lot more subjects. So I divided it into four parts that I think are basically all equally like relevant for becoming a developer. So there's one. The first part is technical fundamentals, like how do you actually learn to code? How do you actually improve your programming? How do you like what should you focus on when you're first starting out? How do you get better at reading code and writing code? All these things here. And then the second phase is called productivity, which is where I talk about like habits, like the importance of habits for getting better and becoming more productive. I also have a chapter on, it's called Done is Better Than Perfect, because I really believe that we hold ourselves back sometimes because we want everything to be perfect, right? Like if you had wanted your first YouTube video to be perfect, well, you might have never released it because it's just super hard. But what's more important is that you just keep putting out videos and you get a little bit better every time. But you actually release something out into the world. And that's like a super key thing that I think a lot of developers, especially new developers, really struggle with.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm insisting in this concept, but not because I am that good, but because I made this mistake. I waited 10 years, like say, I want to be perfect, and then I'll start my YouTube channel. And
Yeah,
this, I passed my last 10 years with this idea. So I've
yeah,
changed this idea this year. Luckily, also because I've known other YouTubers, other developers on Twitter. So this changed my mindset that I don't need to be perfect. My first videos, for example, of this series are way far from being perfect. I
yeah,
hope to get better on the 100 if I can reach to that number. But yeah, so yeah, and one thing, for example, that I've noticed that people really like about these kind of videos that I'm showing the process, so even
mm,
people can also understand maybe if that they also can do that because everyone can
mm,
do this actually.
yeah,
Do you agree with
yeah,
me? I'm not
yeah,
doing
yeah, for sure.
something impossible. I'm doing something that I only could do this, and also it doesn't have to be 100 per day. It can also be one
Yeah,
video call for every
yeah,
week, for example.
yeah.
Something not exactly like mine. You can change something, of course, but this is also to give ideas to people, also to get started. So yeah,
Yeah, and I think it's a great strategy to kind of just like work in public, basically, right? Like you put out these videos all the time, and then you get great feedback on them. I did the same thing with the book. So if I had released, if I had just written a chapter, then I would send it out to my email list, or I would post like parts of it on Twitter. And then you kind of get people like reacting. Some are giving you feedback like, "Oh, this is great," or "No, this I didn't understand this," or whatever. But you're also just building like kind of interest for like your product and your brand and everything at the same time. So it's just really a great way to kind of work, and that's what like what gets enabled by platforms like Twitter and YouTube. You couldn't do that before, and you can't do that if you're just working as a developer. But now you have this opportunity to like kind of share your things with the world, which I think is really really great. Just to just finish up on the book, because so we talked about the two parts. There was like the technical fundamentals and then the productivity with like habits and kind of developing systems for yourself, and focus on building like really small projects but actually finishing them, because that's going to help you get the job. It's going to help you way more than if you have like 8 different projects that aren't finished, that don't really look great or do anything meaningful. And then in the third part, it's this whole thing about the mindset, right? Like how do you deal with imposter syndrome? How do you communicate with your team members? How do you kind of understand the business side of things and use that to create value and contribute to the company? Because these are, like we talked about earlier, these things are pretty overlooked generally, right? We tend to focus on the technical fundamentals, but we skip out on all these other things. And then the final section in the book it's called landing the job. So that's where we kind of talk about how you should apply, like what series of steps you should follow to improve your chances, how you create a great resume, like how you make it stand out, and how you build your portfolio, all these things. And then I also have a section on just like how do you catch attention, right? If you have this online presence, that we're talking a lot about nowadays, where you have a Twitter profile, you have your portfolio, you have maybe a YouTube channel, that's really going to help your chances of landing a job, because it shows that you care enough about coding, you care enough about development to work on all these things outside of your job. Like, I'm sure if you're gonna apply for a job at some point, and you say, hey, look, I have this YouTube channel where I've interviewed 100 great developers, that's going to be so impressive to the company compared to someone else who's just a resume and an application and they don't know anything about. It's just a really great way to stand out of the masses, and it's going to help you land jobs in the future if you do those things. And then I have like a final chapter on basically how to negotiate, because I think, again, we have a lot of focus on how to, land that first job. But then once you're actually there and you get an offer, it's important that you make the most of it, because there's a lot of companies that try to hire juniors for very cheap, because they think, that they can get them cheap because they don't know what the level is.
Yeah, you said a lot, but I think every of them. But
yeah,
you said a
basically.
lot.
Yeah,
Let's say all of them.
Basically, every company, they want to, get you as cheap as possible without you feeling cheated. Like that's the goal of a company, because they're about money. But what you can do is you can realize that you actually have some leverage. So if let's say you've gone through 2 interview rounds and you've talked with a lot of different people in the company, and then they make you an offer, well, that tells you a few things, right? A, they want to hire you, they think you're qualified for the job, and B, they've spent a lot of time on you already. Then they probably just want to get back to work. They don't necessarily love interviewing. They just want to find a great candidate and then get back to work. So that puts you in a position that they're not going to just throw you out for asking for more money. Like if you say, let's say they give you an offer and then you counter with a higher offer, they're not going to just reject it, right? Like they're probably going to try to like meet you in the middle. But a lot of people just forget this, and they just say, oh yeah, I got my first job offer, I'm going to take it because I'm scared that I can't get anything else. And I think that's a wrong idea, because if you've gotten this far, that means the company thinks you can provide value for them, and they should pay you for that. Like they should compensate you. And even if they can't, sometimes they have like budgets, or they can't give you more money, but then you can negotiate other things. I had a job previously where I wanted a specific salary, and they were like, no, we can't do that, we can give you a bit lower. I was like, all right, fine, but then I want to leave half an hour early every day. I want to work like half an hour less. And they were like, fine, that's good. And then that was really great for me, because then that means I had more free time, and I still got a good salary. It's just, I think a lot of people forget that you can negotiate other things than just salary. Like there's a lot of things you can negotiate.
Yeah, and in my opinion, you had the time instead of money, which is way better than money.
Yeah, it's worth way more for me. Like like a few extra thousand in salary, it was worth way more for me to have extra 2.5 hours every week.
Yeah, think about how many things you can do with 1 hour per day. You can write a book, create a side project. You can learn new skills. So that's really a lot. Yeah, that's
you
can
even negotiate. Like let's say you want to work from home 1 day per week. Well, maybe you can kind of get that as part of your negotiation. Just there's other things than money that you can kind of play on.
Yeah. Thank you. I totally agree with this idea mindset that we should not just accept everything just because someone is suffering as a job.
Yeah.
I also
think
that.
Sorry, can I say one thing? And I know that this might seem a little bit far away, like for people who are just starting out, maybe learning to code or are still trying to get that first job. It might seem far away to like think about interviews and negotiating and all those things. But it's really important that you're prepared, because you just need one job to take a chance on you, right? Like if you apply for a lot of jobs and you've taken the time to like build your skills and have a nice resume and a portfolio and stuff, well, then you're gonna get interviews at some point. It's just a question of time. And as soon as you do, well, then you need to be ready for interviews. And as soon as you start doing interviews, then you need to be ready to negotiate. So even if this seems like really far away from you, you just started learning HTML yesterday, well, you're gonna have to learn this sooner or later. So it's kind of nice to have in mind as early as possible, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with this. Thank you so much, Mads. I also I tweet kind of a lot about the mindset, so I really like this conversation. I'm really enjoying this conversation. So if you want to talk about just a little bit about your socials, where can we find you now and maybe in the future? I don't know. And yeah.
So I'm on Twitter, which is probably my biggest profile. It's just my name, Brodt. So you can follow me there. it's where I tweet about basically everything. I try to tweet at least several times per day, and engage with others to try to provide value to people who are just starting out their coding journey, basically. And even also just for more senior people, even people who've been working in the industry for a few years, there's still stuff to learn. Like, you can always improve and you can always get better at things, and that's kind of what I try to share on my Twitter. And then on my website at brodt.com, I have more like in-depth articles about some of these things, like basically what to expect from your first job is one of the newest ones I published. Because you go through all this trouble to like get the first job, but then what happens next, right? Like, now you have to learn how to behave in a company, and how to not feel imposter syndrome and all these things. So yeah, I write on my blog about those things. A lot of focus on landing your job and how to work once you get it. And I also have a newsletter, so you can also get it on my website, where I send out emails like probably once per month, maybe 2 times per month, with kind of the same type of content as blogs. But I think it's very convenient that if people prefer to get my content in their email, well, then they can do that, and then I'll send out an email on just some programming topic, like how to improve your problem solving skills. I think that's one thing we maybe didn't talk about so much, but when we work as developers, our real job is to solve problems, right? Like, we're trying to solve problems for the business, but we're also trying to solve problems for the users that's going to be using our system. And when we kind of like start to think like that, well, that makes everything much easier when you kind of think of this problem solving mindset here. So like, that's just one example of an email I could send out to you. But yeah, you can sign up for that on my website as well. We're up to over 2,000 email subscribers, actually, which I thought was pretty nice that so many people enjoy getting content like that. And it's also, I'll send out, if I'm working on a new course or a book or something, I'm going to send it out to everyone on the email list to kind of let them know about it and follow along on the progress.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We'll put all the links in the description. So please, and also follow him on Twitter. He's a really very good account. I'm already following him.
Thank you, man.
So yeah.
And you should follow Francesco, of course, if you're not already. I mean, if you're not, I don't know how you saw this video, but you should definitely follow and subscribe on YouTube.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you so much, Mads. See you on Twitter again soon. Yeah. I think. Thank you again for me. I'll always remember my 1,000th subscriber.
Oh yeah, that's great, man.
Thank you so much. I always remember about that.
Thank you for having me on the show and just doing this challenge. I think it's really like fun and kind of different idea that I haven't seen before. You just get to experience so many different personalities and learn from all these great people. I think it's really nice idea, and you're doing it very well.
Yeah, it's basically that I really like challenges. Yeah, they really so much. Awesome. So thank you again. Yeah, see you.
No problem. Thanks, man.
Bye.
See you around.